Philadelphia Eagles are up first on our list here. We mentioned this last year. Of course, the Chiefs were the Super Bowl champions, and how do you fix the champs? Well, everybody has. We couldn't fix the champs. Obviously, they didn't win again. They didn't get the repeat. So the Eagles need fixing as well. They have free agents. They have their own cap situation. So that's what we're going to do here. But obviously, Philadelphia, one of the best run organizations in the NFL. They do a great job with managing all of the little edges, Sam, when it comes to the cap, when it comes to stocking up on draft capital, when it comes to how they draft and making sure that they draft high value positions. It's all good with Howie Roseman in Philadelphia, maybe the best GM in the NFL, but we'll try to solve some of their offseason questions here today.
Yeah, not too many of them, particularly, again, when we think back on the Eagles and what we were talking about them. I mean, everyone going into that Super Bowl the last couple of days was like, this is the most talented team in the NFL as well. And all that youth movement, the defense full of young stars, like there's not much that does need fixing. But there are, I think, a couple of sort of off-season concerns or off-season, things that they need to navigate, hurdles to jump. The first of which for me would be re-signing Zack Baun. Obviously a guy that was sort of picked up from a cast-off kind of situational special teams kind of guy and became like an absolute linchpin of that defense as an off-the-ball linebacker. Why it's particularly challenging is because it's kind of an either-or thing. Like he either walks or he gets a long-term extension at big money because he's an off-the-ball linebacker. And the way the franchise tag designation works is, for some reason, the NFL is still shoehorning edge rushers, outside linebackers, into the linebacker designation. So the franchise tag price for a genuine off-the-ball linebacker is way higher than it should be, right? And way higher than a team wants to pay to keep a guy like that around. So, I mean, they could use it on Zack Baun, but it feels like because of that kind of disparity between what the franchise tag should be if you were just looking at off the ball linebackers and what it actually is, because it folds in a bunch of edge rushers, means you're either re-signing Zack Baun to a long-term deal or you're not keeping him around.
I saw the feedback on my microphone. I think I'm back now to my regular mic. I know I had the wrong one set up now. So appreciate the feedback in the chat for that. If you have Zack Baun, would you? I think I would lock him up here because of the fit with Vic Fangio, and Nakobe Dean is injured. He's heading into the last year of his rookie contract next year. I don't think you want to be in this place where you have to essentially have two new linebackers a year from now. I like the idea of locking Baun up, coming off that All-Pro year where he was so good in this Vic Fangio system, and we saw, it all fits together, right? The pass rush, the outside corners, but the underneath coverage defenders in Fangio's system are so important. And the fact that Baun had this breakout season for Philadelphia in this system, I say keep him there, man. And I think that would be huge for the Eagles.
Yeah, it's hard to walk away from an all-pro caliber linebacker if you can make it happen. So obviously it's tricky trying to nail down exactly what his value is, because it's one season that came from nowhere as opposed to, several seasons worth of consistent high-end play like a guy like Fred Warner. But ultimately, like when the choices are keep this guy around for a big money contract that may be a little bit risky relative to some other contracts like that, or let him walk completely and lose an all-pro linchpin from the middle of that defense. When you do have a Nakobe Dean injured, the next man up would be a Jeremiah Trotter type, a rookie that didn't really play that much. It would be extremely risky, sort of deliberately weakening that part of your defense just for the sake of saving some money.
The other big question mark, I think, the other holes to fill essentially for Philadelphia. Right guard Mekhi Becton is going to be a free agent. Every other projected starter is coming back for the Eagles, and then defensively. On the defensive line, Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, probably two of the highly coveted free agents. Obviously, the big story coming out of the Super Bowl was Philly's, not only their pass rush, but their depth. It's always the story in Philadelphia, the depth up front. So let's start with the defensive line. Milton Williams has become coveted because the interior pass rushers around the league, there's not a ton of them, and he is outstanding getting after the quarterback, continues to get better, came into the league as a hybrid player, but really does some damage on the interior. And then Josh Sweat, he's continued to develop, of course, had the big Super Bowl. So I don't know if the Eagles can bring one or both of those guys back. I think they're going to make a ton of money in free agency. So I think we're back to the Eagles going back to the draft deep defensive line class. I could see them drafting defensive linemen maybe with their first 2 picks to replace those guys.
Yeah, and Baun's deal is going to be involved in that as well. Like effectively, you've got 3 reasonably high-priced players hitting free agency at the same time. They've got some space, like they got $24 million worth of cap space, but they're not swimming in cap space. Like they don't have the kind of firepower to just say let's bring them all back. Probably. So you're almost certainly looking at that group and prioritizing, an order of which ones we would want to keep. And if we can make that happen, if we can't, we go down to the next guy. I would imagine priority 1 of those 3 would be Zack Baun, keep the off the ball linebacker in place. He was the all pro. Priority 2, I would imagine, would be Josh Sweat on the edge. In part because, look, Jalen Carter is the most dominant player on that defensive line. He's the primary source of interior pass rush, and I think he's a big part of Milton Williams developing and improving and having the kind of season that he had. You would theoretically project that to the next guy, right? Whoever is going to come in and take the Milton Williams snaps, you would also bank on that guy having a favorable situation because of what Jalen Carter does. And then Milton Williams would be the third guy. Like if you can't bring either of the other 2 back, oh, look, we've got some extra cash. Let's try and keep Milton in the building.
Like I said, I mean, Milton Williams and Osa Odigizua, not necessarily household names, I don't think, to a ton of fans. Maybe some hardcore fans, certainly Eagles and Cowboys fans.
Right.
Those guys could break the bank, with the cap going up and scarcity as far as interior pass rush goes. I think they're going to make a ton of money and probably price themselves out of at least, Philly with some of the other options that they have. If they go the draft route, and again, I think it's going to line up for them picking at 32. Guys like Nick Scourton from Texas A&M, kind of coming off of a subpar year relative to expectations, but he can get after the quarterback. I love BC's Donovan Izaraku, who had a great year last year. I think he could rush the passer and play the run pretty well. I could see them, again, going either edge or interior defensive line as it comes up. The other move, man, and my Morgan Moses jokes will be coming up soon. I won't be giving Morgan Moses to the Eagles here. But DeMarcus Lawrence might be one of my favorite buy low candidates around the NFL. Like, wouldn't this be a classic Eagles move? He's coming off of injury, uber productive player. He's in the division, right? We love the Eagles storyline of killing our in division rivals here. DeMarcus Lawrence as a free agent for the Cowboys as a potential buy low option as they're replenishing the D line. I could absolutely see Howie doing something like that.
Yeah, well, critically, uber productive in the ways that aren't measured by sacks. Like he's the guy that's been underrated or sort of knocked for years because he doesn't get the sack numbers. But in every other capacity, his performance is really good, particularly against the run. He's one of the most dominant run defending edge rushers in the NFL. But yeah, he's a fascinating guy where, I mean, number one, he does look like he's on the wane. So it's like the decline of his career, the twilight of his career. But number two, like if you don't need the sack total, I mean, they would theoretically be moving from one guy who's always been productive but never gotten sacks in Brandon Graham to another guy that's been productive and doesn't get the sacks in DeMarcus Lawrence. Like, Brandon Graham had one double-digit sack season in his career, something crazy like that, but was always one of the most consistent, like, pressure-generating edge rushers in football. Lawrence might not be quite the same player, but it's similar idea that you're taking a guy whose impact cannot be measured accurately by just a sack total.
The other position I mentioned, right guard, Mekhi Becton, they took a 1-year flyer on him. He became a nice, good cogent starter for them for the Super Bowl run. And so replacing him, I could see them doing something similar, right? You just go to that second wave of free agency. The Eagles, the last few years, they've kept most of that offensive line intact, right? And it's always like one moving part or two moving parts. So they've done a nice job of that. One more year of one moving part. Yes, they always probably have to think about Lane Johnson's eventual replacement, maybe draft a future tackle or developmental tackle as they've done through the years. But either second wave of free agency, I think, to replace Becton. Maybe they try to bring him back, but I think he's going to maybe make some money out there. The other options late first round too. Tyler Booker from Alabama. Again, probably the consensus top guard in the draft. I don't know if sometimes that goes 15, sometimes that goes in the 20s or lands in the late first. Donovan Jackson, also from Ohio State, kicked out to left tackle on their playoff run. Both of those guys potentially available. Either way, I think the Eagles O-line, D-line, after 2 years, after last year drafting 2 corners with their first 2 picks, I think they're going back to the trenches with their early draft picks this year.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Definitely, it would be a potential spot for that late first rounder as well. I agree. And then the last thing the last sort of question mark over the Eagles is offense coordinator Kellen Moore, now the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. So they just have to make sure that they don't let that, create the kind of problem that it created a couple of years ago when they lost both coordinators in the same offseason. They got to make sure that they have some kind of continuity going there at offensive coordinator. The move that I saw Jeremy Fowler, I think, reporting was most likely is that Kevin Patullo is going to take that job, or it's his job to lose. He was their pass game coordinator, and he's worn a bunch of different hats within that organization. That would make a ton of sense as a continuity hire, a guy promoted from within, a guy they seem to have faith in, and has been a guy under Nick Sirianni, under Kellen Moore as well. That would make a ton of sense to me. Yeah,
and it's one of those that is tough to comment on. Right, we don't have a ton of data or history to say this is good, bad, or indifferent. But to describe what I would say the Kellen Moore experience, as we talked about when he signed with the Saints, there's no distinct characteristic, I think, about Kellen Moore other than adjusting to his personnel. He did a great job of adjusting to the Eagles personnel, right, with Saquon Barkley, with those pass catchers on the outside. It is a great situation to take over as a play caller, but it's not a slam dunk, right? We're 1 year removed from the Eagles when we were saying Brian Johnson was calling plays, right? He was replacing Shane Steichen from the year before during the 2023 season, and they hit an absolute wall, right? They weren't handling blitz pickups. They wasn't a well-constructed offense in 2023. So it doesn't mean it's completely smooth sailing, but perhaps the continuity of Patullo, following Kellen Moore will help. But it's at least a loss, right, with Kellen Moore, and that's what happens when you win. You lose some coaches, and you have to try to continue to improve or maintain that current level.
Yep.
All right, man. We fix the Eagles? We get to the end of it. It's like, hey, we gave you a bunch of options. We give you some options, give you a little bit of a blueprint for what the offseason might look like. Anything else on the Eagles this offseason? Are they going to repeat?
Much it. I mean, this is theoretically going to be the easiest team we have to deal with, right? They're the Super Bowl champions, and they were a Super Bowl team running in, like not one that went all in to do this. They were a team that was sort of well constructed, is built on a foundation of youth. So, the biggest issues are, we talked about it, right? They've got 4 players that are hitting free agency that they would like to, in an ideal world, bring back. They're probably not going to be able to bring back all 4. If they can bring back a couple of them, maybe even just one of them, then you've got, say, 3 holes to fill between the draft and free agency, and then that offensive coordinator issue.
The only other question that came up in the chat was about all the void years, all the money that they've pushed forward. I'll just say the Eagles, it's not just Howie. It's a great team. They do a great job managing all that stuff. I don't think it's going to be a Saints issue where the credit card comes due. I think they've got this well in hand, and how to manipulate their contracts and their cap to always make sure that they're flexible, but also, maintaining a really strong roster and not losing a whole lot. So I think they're in good shape going forward. Good?
Yep.
Fixed. The Super Bowl champions are fixed.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.